Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Eden Road podcast, where on today's show we're going to be previewing the West Ham game at home on Saturday. Will Pugh of the We Are West Ham podcast is here with me. How you doing, Will?
Yes, Mike, how are you?
All good, mate, all good. Excited to talk about West Ham. I know you might not be.
Yeah, I'm not. You might be, yeah.
After last night's result, we're going to get into that. But just before we get going, remember to drop a comment down below, subscribe to the YouTube and Spotify channels, and also give us a follow on our socials at the Ealing Road on Twitter, at Ealing Road Pod on Instagram. And also, if you haven't already checked out the tactical breakdown that I've released on my personal channel at Mike Riven5 of the last game against Spurs, the 3-1 defeat, go do so now. Going through the kind of best chances of the game, stuff like that. Full 23-minute video. So do go and watch that before watching this preview. Anyway, Will, I think the natural place to start is last night. I watched the game. It wasn't a 5-1, but obviously it just increases the narrative around Lopetegui and West Ham. But just talk to me about the game last night.
Well, yeah, to be honest, mate, I mean, you might expect a West Ham podcaster to watch every single West Ham game. But I just wasn't putting myself through it. I've missed one game home and away all season. And we've been so rubbish. We've been so bad. It annoys me that but big clubs get these seeded draws now, like the home draws in the Carabao Cup anyway, which makes it even more of a Mickey Mouse competition. And when all you have to do is just excuse the clubs who are playing in Europe from playing in it, and it would revitalise it, and clubs would actually want to win it. And we always get tonked at Liverpool. And then I saw the teams. I played football myself. That was the choice. And I played football myself, and then I saw the teams. I was like, I'm not putting myself through it. I know what's going on. I guessed 6-0 to Liverpool when I saw the teams. Turns out there were 6 goals, but I'd totally overlooked the fact West Ham were going to score. I don't know. It just kind of, you just expected it, really. Obviously, Alvarez loses his head. A couple of calls that go against us. We got a bit fortunate with the opening goal. It's one of those where everyone keeps saying this season, we look all right on the ball. And it's like, well, yeah, but you can't, that's not good enough. If A, it isn't producing lots of clear-cut chances, not that you're going to do that at Anfield, but B, when that's twinned with being so leaky at the back and allowing so many chances against you, it's just not a sustainable way to play football. Like, you can't go into every single game, which is exactly how I feel at the moment, kind of feeling like you're 2-0 down because there's no way you're going to keep a clean sheet, let alone limit the opposition to 1. And you just can't go into every Premier League game feeling like you need to score at least 2, probably 3 goals in order to win it. That's just not sustainable. So, long story short, I can't tell you loads about the game last night because I thought I'd save myself the punishment. But Alex Smith, one of the guys on our podcast, did go all the way out there to Anfield, bless him, along with 5,500 other West Ham fans. So, respect to those guys. But, yeah, I could kind of see it coming, so I thought I'd swerve it.
It's a good swerve in hindsight. But
Exactly.
no, I watched the game, and it wasn't a 5-1. I think West Ham were in it at 1-1 and probably with a better side. And then as soon as the first went in, it was just kind of snowball effect. I think heads went down. But my next question was going to be about West Ham starts the season. But you answered that in terms of being slightly underwhelmed by Lopetegui coming in. You know, he's got the pedigree in terms of doing it in Europe. Some of the clubs that he's managed, winning the Europa League. He's been fucking manager of Real Madrid, for Christ's sake. So, like,
yeah, exactly, yeah.
You're expecting a lot going from sort of the Moyes and the unhappiness amongst the fan base. But I think everyone, by the time Moyes left, was agreed that maybe it was the time.
Not everyone. So the vocal, there was a vocal section, which perhaps towards the end became the majority. But if it was down to me, right, and I watched West Ham on my own in the London Stadium with no other West Ham fans there, I'd have happily had David Moyes our manager forever. But there was just, it's one of them. West Ham are a club like that sometimes, where our own fans are as good as they can be and as amazing as they can be. They can also be the undoing. You'll know there's a few clubs that are particularly like that, with particularly large and raucous fan bases, who aren't afraid to, they're passionate about their clubs, but they aren't afraid to get on their backs either. And there's just a denial among supporters sometimes that stuff and their own sort of their own impact, I suppose, on the club and how great it can be, particularly when it comes to negativity. And I think I spoke to Karen Brady a couple of weeks ago, or a few weeks ago now, and she said, although she didn't want to put words in David Moyes' mouth, she thinks a significant part of the reason, not the whole reason, but a significant part of the reason that he left was because he felt underappreciated by the fans. And to hear that, and I felt it at the time, you could feel it, I think was a travesty and a real bad reflection on our club, because it's never been as good for me. On the whole, like, it's easy to look at periods, and last season, the second half of last season was very bad, but off the back of the best ever Premier League start points tally we had at the halfway stage. So it does sort of annoy me a bit that, not saying, not you annoying me, but when fans go, oh yeah, everyone was ready for him to go. It's like, no, they weren't. Like, there are some, but the ones who weren't,
the more vocal ones,
were just quiet. Yeah, were just quieter about it, and would get shouted down, by those who were desperate for him to leave, who thought there was going to be this utopia the other side of it. But yeah, I'm sort of never really cowed by such people. So I was vocal about my Moyes support, and still am now. And it's kind of what we've seen so far was a bit like, well, like, there was a fairly strong chance this was going to happen. And when we spend like 2 or 3 seasons coming 12th, and it's all just a bit blur and average again, I won't be the only one. I'll be able to publicly say, remember the good old days, but there'll be plenty of people who are so vocally Moyes out who will be privately thinking, I remember the good old days, but God, I'm not allowed to say it because I'll lose face.
I was listening to a couple of podcasts in the week. The Athletic released it. They both released episodes based on West Ham, and there was one guy talking about this kind of oscillating sexiness scale of West Ham managers. So you go from like Allardyce, not sexy, to Bilic, more sexy, Moyes, not sexy, to Pellegrini, sexy, to back to Moyes, not sexy, and now Lopetegui's sexy again. But they kind of caveated that with because of the pedigree that he comes in with, and the way that he builds his teams are based on kind of defensive organisation and sort of that style of play. So it's not like a huge difference from Moyes. Go on, you probably better.
No, you're right, mate. So keep going. It's just nice to hear someone else of a more neutral stance make the same point. Like, you've got plenty of fan accounts who were sort of, not just fan accounts to be fair, but just normal fans as well, who were all sort of jumping up and down and going, oh yeah, Lopetegui, because you see the CV, and it's like, okay, what are you expecting here? Because you were like vitriolic about David Moyes because he was happy to let the other team have the ball and play on the counter attack and sort of try and be harder to beat or just spring back against teams. Like, you were pretty vitriolic about that, but like Lopetegui is the only real difference is he still like is keen on defensive solidity. Not that you can tell that from the first 5 Premier League games. But that he likes to have a bit more possession. And honestly, it absolutely you sort of got to laugh because you'll cry. The amount of, and I include James Jones, my co-host and very good friend, the co-host of the We Are West Ham podcast, who was pretty vocally Moyes out towards the end. Not vitriolic, he was sensible, he was Moyes out. And the mental gymnastics some West Ham fans are doing now, we're going, oh yeah, I can see the positive signs. Just refusing to say we look abysmal at the back. Like, just say it. You're allowed to say it. Like, we look terrible at the back. You're allowed to. And there's loads of that going on at the moment. And it's just like, like me and James had an argument the other day on the podcast because he couldn't bring himself to say that the Chelsea performance was a bad performance. And it's like, flipping hell. Towards the end, I was strongly anti-Moyes, and I'd probably see things. Strongly pro-Moyes, and I'd probably see things through that lens. But it's like the flip side of it now is almost arguably more unbearable. Like, I'd rather be like playing well in West Ham or getting some good results and have fans not think we're playing well than what we've got now, which is us be terrible but fans be determined to like make out like it's good. It's just absolutely crazy at the moment.
How long though before you can judge him? Because like just looking at your start to the season, I mean, you got Villa, Palace, City, Fulham, Chelsea, and you could argue that the 2 games where you're expecting to get points, you have done in beating Palace and getting a point of Fulham.
Yeah.
So is it too early to be kind of saying, well, I told you so about sort of keeping Moyes? What do you think, like, in terms of the starts of the season with how Lopetegui started and the teams that he's played against? Is it enough? Has he not done enough to get you worried, if that makes sense?
I think you've got to separate the 2 issues, right? I do, as much as it pains me to sort of accept it, I think the nature of West Ham and the fan base and the club and the ownership and everything, right? It was the right time to part ways. Like, it had become unsustainable. Whether or not I agree that with those large portions of the fan base and what they were saying, regardless of whether I think they were right or wrong, the fact how they were acting and the things they were feeling and how that was translating into the stadium, it had sort of become unsustainable. It had become a bit stale. And I think, you know, it was probably the right time for that to happen. So, like I say, and I'm saying, oh, if there were no other West, and I was watching West Ham on my own, I'd happily see Moyes, but I'm not silly. The reality of the situation, it was the right time for him to leave. I think what's happened though is the replacement. I'm not convinced about Lopetegui, and I think the thing I keep saying is, because again, it's easy to paint a picture and go, "Oh, you're ridiculous, mate. If you think we're gonna be playing like Brazil already," I get a lot of that, and I'm like, no. I'm not saying it's necessarily we have to be amazing straight away. What I do want to see, or what I would expect to see now, what I would like to see and would make me feel a lot better about everything, is if we could see some discernible patterns of play, particularly when we've got the ball, of what we're at least trying to do. I'd be more than happy to go, look, you got to let the players gel a bit more. You got to let these ideas click and settle in. But at least I can see what they're trying to do. Do you know what I mean? Like, I mean, defensively we look abysmal, and I don't know what the problem is there. It feels like it's in the midfield rather than our actual defenders. It feels like we're just getting completely like murked, for want of a better word, in the midfield. And that's just leading to the opposition being able to win the ball back, play direct, straight passes through the defence, and it's just wide open all the time. And that also twins in with Wan-Bissaka. Lopetegui's obviously telling him to like be well attacking, so he's always out of position, and we're just leaving ourselves far too exposed. But it's when we have the ball, I can't see anything, Mike, that when we have the ball that I'm like, oh, I see what he's trying to do. I see how he's trying to build attacks, whether it be through the middle, direct balls out wide, or even just Tony Pulis ball or Pep Guardiola, whatever. I don't know, and it doesn't feel like the players know when we win possession back what the plan is. Like, you know, you see some teams, right? City, go back to the back, Arsenal as well, reset, play it along the back, blah, blah, blah. Some teams like to go direct. Couldn't tell you. I couldn't tell you what Lopetegui's attacking philosophy is. And that's the concern for me. Obviously, the defence, I mean, we'll have to sort that out one way or the other. But it's more like I'm not seeing anything that is going to click. Like, it's just like, I don't know what I'm waiting for. I don't know what things I'm waiting to gel or happen. So, and you're right? Those games you mentioned, and I think that what I've just said is more the issue. Like losing at home to Champions League Aston Villa, £1 billion squad Chelsea, and the best team in the world in Man City. No real travesty. I think the Villa game looks more friendly on us than it was. We lost 2-1, but should have lost 4-1. They missed an open goal, and John Duran missed an absolute sitter, as well as the 2 they did score. Fulham away, I went there. We were awful. Fulham were really good. And we rely on Danny Ings, who, you know, hasn't been able to hit a barn door since he's come in and collected his 130 grand a week wages. He is awful. And we're relying on him to score an equaliser. That is not a sustainable way of collecting points, what we did at Fulham. And even Palace, the Palace game, that defensive problems again. We were 0-0 at half time. Eze had hit the post, and Mateta, I think it was, had missed a gilt iron 1-on-1. We get a couple of goals in quick succession in the second half. They hit the post again and had another huge chance. That's the problem. It's just not sustainable to give the opposition so many chances. It just isn't. And that twinned with our lack of attacking plan is, it's pretty grim from my point of view at the moment. And that's the thing that needs to change urgently, is for at least fans to start seeing what's happening, or what the plan is. Because, you know, if it just carries on and we lose, if we get the same amount of points from the next 5 as we've got now, particularly if there's some winnable games in there, like it will be serious question time. Like, you know, what do we do here? Where do we go? Do we need to make another call already?
Last one on just the kind of general West Ham stuff before I want to talk about the game a little bit. Like, going into the season, you're thinking the business that you did, Kilman, Fulkrug, Wan-Bissaka, plus the players that you already had from last season, Paqueta, Bowen, Kudus. Everyone was kind of saying before the season, you know, this could be a good year for West Ham, bringing in Lopetegui as well, considering what he did with Wolves. Of those transfers, I think I know Fulkrug's injured now, but it doesn't. The early signs still looks like kind of West Ham's search for a number 9 that can score goals on a consistent basis. Other than Mikel Antonio, will go on. But other than Fulkrug, who's injured, who's done well out of the ones that have come in?
Well, firstly, Mikel Antonio is not that anymore. Hasn't been for a long time. Like, he should be coming off our bench with 20 minutes max to go. That should be his role at West Ham now. To have him still starting games, it's been a travesty to have him starting Premier League games for 3 seasons basically now, mate. So it was worth clearing that one up. Fulkrug, I was really excited about that when he signed. I think it is too early to judge him. A couple of games, takes a bit of getting used to. You didn't see anything great from him really, but I think he is a player who relies a lot on the service he's going to get. I don't think he's one of them sort of create things out of nothing. And now he's injured, so a bit unfortunate. John Duran banging in goals. We were heavily linked with him. It looked like he was coming. And then that one fell through, and you think, oh, he's the sort of player I feel would have fit the mould a bit better and fill the Antonio gap. Wan-Bissaka, I'm not convinced about at all. I wasn't convinced when we signed him. I didn't think Vladimir Coufal needed replacing, and I think it's difficult to judge at the moment. I don't want to be too hard on him because he hasn't looked very good. But I think that's because of the instruction he's being given. I think he's like being told to be well too far out the way up the pitch, as part of some attacking thing of getting the ball out wide. But like all that, we haven't really created anything groundbreaking with him involved. Certainly nothing that springs to mind. Yet we have conceded like goals, plural, from him being wildly out of position and Alvarez having to cover. Guido Rodriguez should never play for West Ham again. He is useless. He got dragged off after 37 minutes in the game at home against Chelsea. He was terrible against Fulham before. Carlos Soler, I feel and hope, and I think started Anfield as well. We'll slot in there. So Kilman is by far the best of the new signings. He looks really composed and comfortable. I think he's just been let down a few times by his midfield, and being put in positions. I think a couple of fans will probably listen and go, "Oh, what are you talking about?" You know, he's made a mistake here and there, and it's like, yeah, but I think he's just left exposed by your midfield. You can't expect him to do so much. But we needed to replace Zuma and Aguerd, and I think that's a decent investment. There really, yeah. And Somerville, he looks really promising. I was fearful he was going to be Benrahma 2.0, but thank God he's already looking like he can actually like cross a ball and knows where the goal is, rather than just sort of doing a few step overs and then throwing his arm up in the air crying when he inevitably loses the ball.
Let's not get into that again, Will. Let's not do that again.
Good. That was the best thing we've done all summer, actually, in answer to your question. Get rid of him.
Just in terms of what last one, I know I said the last one was the last one, but in terms of Kudus, Paqueta, Bowen, you look at that 3 out of any 3, or like an attacking trio in the Premier League, that is right up there. Why is it not working? Why hasn't it clicked just yet?
I will say this, right? I think Kudus is getting a little bit more praise than he warrants at the moment. But it's also difficult because I don't really think that anyone, including most West Ham fans, know what to do with him, what his best position is, what his strengths are. He's a really good dribbler of the ball. He's really strong. But you sort of, again, you kind of wanted a bit more end product from him this year. So I think it's one of them. If it sort of carries on like it is, people start getting a bit disgruntled with him in for another 2 months, and the returns are similar to what he's done so far. I think people get a bit disgruntled. Paqueta is having a weird one. He's one of them, like, the best one. He's having an odd one this season. I don't know. There's a story out today again about more betting stuff. Lopetegui kind of came out and had a go at him last week in a very football managery way. Someone asked a question about his form, and rather than saying, like, what are you talking about, he sort of played into it a bit and was like, sort of just by answering the question, almost accepted that there was a problem. He's a Rolls Royce of a football player. Best example against Chelsea, he took it past about 4 people, like dazzling skills, proper Brazilian street ball stuff. And it was like, right, lay it across 5 yards across the box then, and we'll have a clear shot on goal. But he tried to do the 5th player, and he gets the ball nicked off him, and the whole crowd's like, a couple of out of character loose passes. So I don't know what's going on there. And then Jared Bowen, again, another victim of the system, whatever that system is, really, because he's sort of not been a shadow of his former self, but the system seems to be stifling him. He hardly ever gets the ball anymore, because he was such an integral part of the counter-attack under Moyes, where he picked the ball up deep and drive. Because we're trying to be higher up the pitch now, you feel like he has less space than he ever did, and he's not able to show his talents, even though he's our best player last season. Yeah, and again, Mikel Antonio, he's so past it. I haven't really got the words for that anymore. I've said it for so long. He just shouldn't be starting up front for Premier League teams anymore. So, yeah, I don't know. I just feel it's a little bit of, it's the system more than anything, whatever that is. Like, that is the thing that needs sorting.
Well, let's talk about the game then. How are you feeling ahead of it on Saturday?
Bad. Yeah, I'm going. That'll be my second away trip to West London in quick succession.
You're not having London this year, aren't you? Liverpool was the only game outside of London you've had this year.
Exactly. Yeah. But no, I'm not really. I'm not full of the joys of spring, mate. To be honest. Yeah, I think we'll lose again. I just can't. I can't. Because there's not one obvious thing where you think that needs sorting, then we'll be fine. I don't know. I just think we'll concede again, and I also can't. Like, I don't know. If it was 2-2, I'd probably be fairly. If we're going to get a result, it's going to be 2-2. Like, if we manage to nick it, like, you're going to score at least once. We haven't beaten you away in the Premier League since you've been back. It was only breaking the curse at home last season, where we hadn't beaten you in the league at all until we beat you at home last year. So, no, I like an away day. It's in London, so I can. I actually cycled to Fulham, first away game I've ever cycled to. So it's close. It won't completely ruin my day, and I can be back in time in my flat for dinner. But yeah, I honestly, I'm just. It's one of them things. This isn't like my shtick as a West Ham fan. Last season, people had enough of me because I was overly positive. But there's nothing that sort of makes me think, oh yeah, if we sort this out, we'll be good. We'll concede. I understand you're pretty leaky at the back as well. But you've, I think, won the games that you would expect to, Southampton and Palace, and then lost away to Liverpool, City and Tottenham, wasn't it? Yes, which... So no, I'm not confident, and I think you'll win.
I was going to say, kind of throwing back to the previous games that we've played, obviously we'd won every game that we played against Moyes and West Ham since we've been in the Prem, apart from the home game last year. So I was starting to think maybe Thomas Frank had Moyes' number in terms of that. So when I was looking at it as like the third game, but our third home game of the season under a new manager in Lopetegui, it was kind of intriguing in terms of how West Ham might set up, how it might make for a good game potentially. But from what you've told me, it doesn't sound good, really.
I just think it's our midfield is so weak, and Thomas Souček had become this, I mean, totally unreasonably, this sort of fashionable laughing figure. But he's not very glamorous, and he's maybe not the prettiest, but he's like proper like a Marouane Fellaini type. Like, where the win stats you have when he's in the team compared to without, and that's where you see his value, and he's always in like the top 5 for distance covered after every Premier League game week. But again, it's just, like, Lopetegui wants this new style, but the midfield is pants. If I really want to see Souček starting in a deep line role, because he started him in the number 10 against Fulham to rest Paqueta, that did not work. Like, he's an 8. He's like that. He's not a holding midfielder, he's the next one, like the link player almost. He's not great on the ball, but he does loads of the ugly stuff off it to mean that, you know, you're sort of harder to beat, and we're not hard to beat at the moment. So, yeah, it'll be a 4-2-3-1, I guess, and I imagine it'll be like Areola, Wan-Bissaka, Kilman. Who will you have then? Emerson. I'm not sure on the state of his injury, actually, whether Emerson will play. It'd be Cresswell if not, or Soufal potentially. Rodriguez, he surely won't start him again, so you're probably looking at either Alvarez or Souček is what I'd like to see, but Alvarez or Carlos Soler. And then Paqueta, I'd like to see Paqueta, Somerville on the left, Bowen on the right. Sorry, Bowen up front, and then Kudus on one of the wings. But it may be that we see Antonio start and Somerville to come off the bench, perhaps. But again, the midfield needs sorting urgently. So unless Souček and Alvarez start in that midfield behind one of Paqueta or Kudus, depending if he decides to play out wide, you'll win. So if you see Rodriguez and or Soler on the starting line, Soler less so maybe, I think he'll grow into it. But yeah, if you see Rodriguez on the starting lineup, you'll win.
Any of Brentford's players worry you in particular?
Yeah, Mbeumo. Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think it feels like Visser loves a goal against West Ham, but most of your players have in the last few seasons. Yeah, I've always liked Mbeumo. I really like him. Yeah, I think there was some whispers about West Ham having a look at him over the summer. I wouldn't have hated that signing at all. So yeah, he's sort of the main threat, I guess. And you've been a bit unlucky with some of your star players in Henry and Thiago. You signed to replace Tony being injured. So no,
now as well. So you won't see him.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. What a travesty that was, by the way. That so should have been a red card for Kovacic.
Yeah, a lot of Brentford fans will agree with you. But no, we're a little bit hamstrung by injuries already, and it's not too far on in the season. We had an absolute nightmare with them last year, so it will be for me in terms of how Brentford might set up. It's really interesting because I think he'll go back to a 4, but then Keane Lewis-Potter's been playing quite well. Kevin Schade, who I don't think has played against West Ham. I don't think you've seen him. He's lightning quick German. We signed him from Freiburg a couple of years ago.
Yeah,
he is very dangerous if he plays on the wing. So it interests me from West Ham start to the season. You might be a little bit pessimistic, but for me, like Brentford have played well in every game that we've played so far.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping we don't get unstuck. It will be very Brentford to go and lose to West Ham on Saturday, similar to how we did last year. We had a game against Everton after playing really well in all of our opening games and then got beaten comprehensively by Everton at home. So ahead of it's giving me those kind of vibes, but I'm hoping not. But yeah, well, always a pleasure, mate. Always a pleasure. Ealing Road will be back with immediate post-match reaction after the full-time whistle on Saturday. Remember to drop a comment down below, subscribe to the YouTube and Spotify channels. Follow us on the socials at Ealing Road on Twitter, at Ealing Road Pod on Instagram. And like I said at the top of the show, if you haven't already watched the tactical breakdown of the Spurs defeat, go do so now. That episode is live on my personal YouTube channel, and the link for that will be in the description of this video. Will, always a pleasure, mate. Good luck for Saturday.
Nice one. Cheers, Mike.